Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio. It is Friday, September 9th, 2022, and welcome to episode 86, guys. Before we dive in, fairly brief episode ahead of us, kind of one particular point I want to make to maybe help alleviate the stress of content creation that you guys might be facing for your businesses, for your projects, things like that. Quick plug from last week. Episode 84, talked about LinkedIn marketing, went into a little bit of depth on some strategies and some tactics there. We published that episode on August 31st, so definitely check that out if you guys get a chance. And we followed it up on Friday the 2nd, right before the holiday weekend here in the States, with episode 85, which was really kind of focusing on how you might develop your differentiators, like really zeroing in on the things that absolutely separate your company from other companies, and then using that to kind of drill into and create wedges and spacing between you and competitors in your industry or your field or your region or whatever the case may be. So just kind of wanted to give a quick plug to those two things, but the main thrust of today's episode, to go with our catchy title for this episode about making mistakes and so forth, is that when you're creating content, particularly, I'm really kind of talking mostly about video, but this could apply to audio. I don't think it really applies to textual content. I mean, maybe there's some creative way somebody could point that out to me that could also be an advantage, but I'm mainly talking about, situations where people may particularly run into nerves, where you're, producing something or saying something or delivering some message imperfectly, and you're aware of it, and you're on camera and you don't like the way you look, or you don't like the way you said a particular word, or you stumbled over a word and mispronounced it, whatever the case might be. In fact, you probably hear me do it on this podcast pretty often. So the issue is that the natural instinct you're going to have when you're in those situations, and again, I think video is the most pronounced, probably far and away the most pronounced format that this is going to happen. But when you produce content in that vein, your instinct is going to be, it needs to be perfect. If I don't come across perfectly, if I don't deliver the message perfectly, if I don't speak and explain things perfectly, then it's not a usable piece of content. It goes in the trash bin, and we go back and re-record. And you can just imagine, given that we are fallible beings, what that really ends up meaning for your content. It means you don't produce or publish anything. and I mean that literally in most cases. I mean, some people will eventually get it right or will eventually give up and say, okay, fine, post it. But the majority of people who fall victim to what I just described, they will never publish anything. Like literally, zero. Never publish a single piece of content because they are expecting it to be utterly and abjectly perfect before the world sees it. And this is just never going to happen with any degree of regularity. You might get lucky, maybe one time out of 100, and you actually record a video and it comes out perfect and you said everything perfect and it didn't take forever to do it and that sort of thing. So sure, that's a possibility. But 99 times out of 100, it's not going to happen that way. And so you say, okay, Chris, I hear you, but I still don't feel comfortable posting something that doesn't look perfect, that doesn't come across perfect. Why would something that I produce, that I appear in, a video, whatever, why would it work well for it to be done incorrectly? Why would it work well for it to come off imperfectly? Like, what would the case be for that? And so the case that I want to make to you guys today goes to authenticity. If you see, let's say just right now, while you're listening to this podcast, or maybe you have a second phone in your hand, you just popped open like TikTok and you pulled up a TikTok video of somebody discussing something about their business. And, not that the video is a complete disaster. That's not what I'm referring to. But let's say they were talking about their product and they stumbled across a few words a couple times. Or the editing of the video was not completely perfectly timed. You may not realize it, you may not think about it, but your brain will automatically assign a certain degree of credibility to that individual as being authentic. Now, let me be clear. There's a spectrum that you would traverse here. And the spectrum is from completely fake to completely real and disastrous with the sweet spot being in between. And what I mean by that is, if you do the thing I just described, you open up a TikTok, you see a video, it's slickly produced, it's totally, everything seems rehearsed, everything seems perfectly timed. The whole thing seems like a very glossy, high production affair. You more than likely will not trust that individual right away. Now, maybe over time, if you see that person scores of times and maybe even have some interaction with them, you may be able to erode that initial impression. But more than likely, human psychology suggests to us, tells us, that you will look at that person and say, that's a sales pitch. That is somebody trying to convince me of something that benefits them. That's why it's so slickly produced. That's why there's no errors. That's why it looks like it came out of a production studio. I don't even know if that person's real. I don't even know if that person is in the business. They may be an actor, etc., etc., etc. Now, admittedly, you could go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and you could end up in a situation where you literally watch a video of an authentic individual who just completely botches the video, doesn't remember anything they want to say, can't get the words out, never describes the product. Just completely sinks the whole thing. Obviously, even if you think that person's real, you're going to be like, well, maybe I should look somewhere else for this product because this person is not competent. But that's not what we're talking about. If you produce content authentically, if you get on camera, if you deliver a message, if it's not perfectly, slickly produced, and it has, a bump in the road here, a bump in the road there, stumble over a word, mispronounce a word, forget something for a moment and have to think for a moment, and then come right back into what you were saying, those types of things are normal human behaviors that when we witness them, we assume we're dealing with a normal human, an authentic, normal human being. And by normal, I mean in the context of marketing versus authenticity versus salesmanship versus all those factors that you're going to have kind of at play in these media, in these media formats, video on social media platforms, audio on social media platforms, that sort of thing. So we're just going to look at that situation more authentically and be like, oh, that person's like me. I'm not a professional speaker. I can probably get 90% of it out just fine, and then 10% is going to come out a little bit rough. And you start bonding to that individual faster because you believe them quicker. You get into that know, like, and trust sequence faster and more efficiently. So obviously you know them because you're seeing them. You've encountered them on your social media platform. Let's say it's on TikTok, for example. So you know them because they got your attention and you can see them and you're consuming their content. And then you start to like them because they seem down to earth. They seem like a relatable human being with imperfections. And then you trust them. And you trust them sooner because they are coming across authentic. They're not hiding anything. They're not producing away every little error that they might make or every little word that might be off in their presentation. They're not standing against a fake background. They don't have a fake microphone in front of them pretending they're on a podcast. They're just talking into the camera, or they're just talking to another individual authentically and delivering a message free form. And that is always going to, just think about your real world interactions. Think about when you meet somebody in a workplace, or you meet somebody out at a social event, or meeting for the first time. The more stiff and rigid and polished the individual appears, the less likely you are to trust them. I'm not saying it's a given that you definitely won't trust them, but it's just less likely. When we deal with people who seem like us, who seem relatable, they're not perfect, but they're not necessarily incompetent, that hits that zone of like, okay, this individual, I can do business with this individual. I can trust this individual. I feel comfortable with this individual. Okay? So just food for thought, guys. I want to kind of cut it off here at around the 10-minute mark. Think about giving yourself permission. Excuse me. Giving yourself permission. There, I just did it. A little bump in the road here in the podcast. Give yourself permission to make mistakes, to produce content that's not perfect, but quickly gets out into the marketplace, quickly represents and builds your brand, and quickly presents you in the authentic light that you are. Like, just literally puts you forward as I would meet you in person. You know, the person I see on the TikTok video should be the person I see when I shake hands with you or meet you in person and look you in the eye. Okay? So with that, guys, hope everybody had a great week. Happy Friday. Weekend is upon us. We will have another episode out tomorrow on Saturday, September 10th. I know it's a little bit rare that we publish on the weekend, but we want to get you the 2 episodes this week. So check back for episode 87 tomorrow, Saturday, September 10th. And in the meantime, hope you guys are having a great week, a great start to September, and we'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.